as you're climbing and struggling, you're in a fog, right? And you don't know what to do next. There's fog all around you. When you look back, you see the hill, you see the path, and you no longer see the fog. So it's always easier to look back and see how everything connects and how there turned out to be a path. But when you're in it, it's fog. You only see fog in front of you. And it's a simple concept, but as long as you know that, like, you're not going to, while you're doing it, you're not going to see the next step. But the struggle is what's important. So when you look back, you see the struggle, but you don't see the fog anymore. But remember, when you're doing it, there's still fog in front of you. Hey, you got Pathless and I got Golem. That's nice.
You want to know the funny thing? I got a Pathless thing from the team, and it was an old Abzu one from the team that was just because I sit at my desk and I'm leaning on my elbows all the time, it started to disintegrate. And so my girlfriend we were in the middle of working on Abzu, and my girlfriend bought a blank blue thing on Amazon and then meticulously hand painted the logo. So this is bootleg merch. And she even painted the Godslayer.
Oh,
jeez.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I showed up to a meeting in this one day, and everyone in the team looked at me like, "Where in the hell did you get that?"
Yeah.
And then they subsequently made real ones that are similar, and I alternate back and forth between the two. But that's funny.
That's very cool.
By the way, before I forget, I don't know what, if anything, I'll do with it, but Marty, just for due diligence, are you cool if I record this and possibly, throw on YouTube later or something like that?
Sure, it's fine.
Beautiful. Well, the impression I got from both of you gentlemen is that it might be you both seem to take an interest in the idea of kind of, maybe playing back some stuff, getting some feedback, but then really trying to primarily use this time to talk more big picture career arc kind of stuff, and not, just a relentless drilling down into the particulars of one's music. And since in the end, my main priority is really just that it felt useful to you. I don't actually have much of an agenda there. I do have the music that you sent for me queued up, ready to play back. Remind me what I agreed to do. Well, in principle, the idea was to give feedback on some demos, and just to kind of be a sanity check, I think, on where things stand, whether that be writing itself in an abstract sense, production quality, all that kind of stuff. That's where a lot of these go.
Both you guys are obviously musicians, because I see you've got a nice microphone, you got a keyboard.
Right. Every musician has to have their instrument framed in the background of their Zoom calls,
except
right?
me.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong room.
my wardrobe is more visible than any of the instruments here, but
I see a guitar case, so there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, so then maybe that's a good leaping off point. We'll start with you, Eric.
Okay.
You want to just give a sense of where you're at and sort of self-described position within your career, and because I think it helps us to know where you're coming from and where you think you kind of fit in the grand scheme of things, to know, because I would rather talk to you in a way that's specific, you know what I mean? Like if you're
right,
there's a big difference between someone who's, a freshman in undergrad in college versus someone that's been pounding the pavement for 10 years, and like the questions are going to invariably be different. So I just love to get a sense of where you're at.
Right. So I'm in Chicago, and my primary wheelhouse is music for theater. I started out doing music for a lot of immersive theater. I don't know if you have done immersive
Oh yeah,
or been to an immersive show.
very much.
Yeah,
it.
so which I
haven't-
think
haven't said it.
it's sort of like the attendees are an active participant in the show, so the actors are like living around you. Perhaps you have some agency in what's happening. So it's sort of like a living video game in some regard, but like with a lot of people. I guess like the
Tony and Tina's wedding or something, or
sort of, yeah, like that's like a proto immersive theater. The big one now is that everyone talks about is Sleep No More in New York. That's been running forever.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's but anyway, it's sort of got that I think a commonality with video games where you are writing a ton of music for maybe what happens in a span of a minute,
Sure.
because you just need you need to pad out the time a little bit, and you don't know what's going to happen. But
Right.
from there, I ended up doing my own musical theater work. So I've been writing that for 3-ish years now. I had one thing produced, and I'm working on another now, but the pandemic is, its thing. But I'm trying to stay busy. So yeah, my trajectory is mostly that. So it's not entirely. I think I sent this in an email to Austin about how it's not really video game related, but I think there's a lot of commonality between theater music and game music, and a lot of overlap. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Is implicit in that you want to be doing more games and move into that space? I mean, I would assume that by virtue of being here, that's at least part of it.
It is an interest of mine. I wouldn't say it's my end career goal. I'd like to explore it. I've always been interested in it. I did a little bit of it in college, doing like music for game jams and stuff. And I've always liked making music for more interactive elements, and maybe even bringing some theater stuff into that. So it's
Interesting. I don't even have. At my age, I still don't have an end career goal. I just.
right.
I relate to that.
I don't want it to end, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's like as especially musicians nowadays, or composers specifically, tying yourself to one medium, I don't think is the best career choice, just because it's hard to become just a film composer or just a game composer or just a theater thing. I think it's more interesting to try to do as much as you can,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Well,
Anyway, my father was he was at Steppenwolf. After he retired, he did a lot of acting. He was at Steppenwolf and Goodman and whatever, a bunch of dinner theater places. So there was a whole point in the 90s where I was going to plays and musicals that my dad was in. It was a blast to see him up there doing stuff. So I know the Chicago theater scene. It's very robust.
Yeah, it's a very I feel like a very not in your face. I don't want to say in your face. It makes it sound like we're all aggressive, but like a very personal form of doing theater where it's not so much audience stage. I feel like the actors are still very much like working in the city, so it's people it's stories that so that's stuff that I like about Chicago.
Very cool.
Well, I certainly, you're not the first one to pick up on the kind of connective tissue between immersive theater and game scoring. It's a big part of why immersive theater interests me so much, is I feel like that whole field feels like it's just getting started. They've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. I've done a handful, or I don't even know what the right term would be. I've been an audience member / participant in. I've experienced several productions recently, or pre-pandemic. Even then, there are people trying to figure out how to make pandemic-friendly versions. Like you can do escape rooms over Zoom and stuff, which it's interesting. It's the way we adapt. But pivoting, Harry, same question, just to help give us a sense. I kind of know your answer already, but if only for Marty's benefit. your self-analyzed sort of career positioning here?
Yeah, so I don't think that. Basically, I'm trying to kickstart some sort of a career at this moment. It's like this year, maybe the pandemic actually helped a bit in that I thought to myself, okay, just give it all this year and try to make something out of it. I don't know. I don't really have any. I have some experience doing. First of all, I live in Greece. And I have some experience doing smaller projects, very indie, one or two things about theater or some stuff through game jams, like Eric mentioned. But I guess it's not an end goal because that was a very good point. But I would really, really love to work on video games. Obviously, what Eric said is true, and I still like. Any opportunity would be actually great to work just on anything if it means that I'm going to make music for it. But my sort of dream, let's say, it's to primarily work on video games. So I'm just trying to at this moment, I guess my main plan for this year has been to just start writing a lot of music and sending it to a bunch of people, sort of asking, will you hire me for your game or whatever, and not think too much about if I really like what I sent out or if this was the best way to score something or whatever. I would just want to start collecting those no's and rejections, which sort of has been I've sort of understood that for the last few years, and it was actually very liberating when I realized, okay, so everyone says it's very natural to get a lot of rejections until something comes up, and it made it easier for me to just start pitching because a no it was like a box. Okay, I got a no. Let's go to the next one, no, or the next, rejection.
I have thoughts about that. Marty, is there anything you want to say before I?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just getting just a little bit more background. Like, what's your guys' musical? What instruments did you start on? What was your education? How just so stuff like that. Just a real quick synopsis, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can go first. I went to music school here in Chicago. I went to a place called DePaul. I studied sound recording.
Okay.
But my musical career, I started on classical bass, so like upright.
Yeah.
Played piano. My mom was a piano teacher. I'm not good at piano. I do I guess what you would call a ranger's piano, where I can smack around.
But you do use your thumbs, right?
I use a heavy hand. I'll put it that way. And then I played in bands, so I played guitar, bass, whatever I needed to fill in on. And then at music school, I did vocal. I was a vocal performance. That's what got me in.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah, so my instrument, I guess, is the guitar, even though I haven't really touched it in quite a long time. I started off with classical guitar when I was very young, and then realized what I actually wanted was to learn the electric guitar. Did a bunch of stuff like that, and then I entered the how do you say this in English? The Department of Music Studies here in the University of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens here in Greece. Never actually got my degree. I don't know what the world is going to think about that if this ever goes out.
No one will ever give a shit.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody cares about your degree.
I've never once. I can tell you, I was one of those students that busted my ass in school, and really, I had it in my head that I had to, get as close to straight A's as possible and all that kind of stuff. And I can tell you that, quite literally, not even as a, idle curiosity, never mind as a job requirement. Has anyone ever asked me about the most that I've ever been asked is where I went to school. And then if I, no matter, and then usually the conversation will pivot immediately to something else. I've never been asked anything, you know, did you graduate? Were you magna cum laude? What was your GPA? Can I see your diploma? Like, it's just, nobody cares. And the number of successful composers that, you know, have nothing resembling formal training and who write great music. I mean, of course, the king example of all time of that is our dear friend here's collaborator on Destiny, one of the few knighted composers who can't even read sheet music. I assume still to date, at least famously, that was always the case.
Last time I talked to him, he says, "You know, I can't read music."
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, amazing.
So yeah, so if you can be Sir Paul and it not matter, I think it's fine to not matter for anybody else. So yeah, I think yeah, I wouldn't put any credence in any of that kind of stuff, for the record. Well, it's interesting. You guys are two really different places and really different outlooks, and which is cool actually, because there might be valuable crosstalk there. Since typically, you know, in the past when I've done these things, or like when we do the, you know, the demo derby at GDC, which is in a way conceptually similar to this, everyone tends to sort of resemble each other after a while, but two very different stories here. So we'll tell you what. Why don't I play back some stuff? We can give our thoughts, and then just, you know, and be as brief as it's useful. And then we can zoom out to some of these more big picture, because the thing I really latched onto particularly here, Harry, that I want to get into, and I'm really curious your thoughts on as well, Marty, is this, when you were talking about kind of mass blitzing the world with music and kind of canvassing the universe with as much of your stuff as possible to kind of rack up those no's. There were things in there that I want to unpack further, because there are things that I thought, oh yeah, I've been there and I've done that. And also there are things that I've learned from that might refine that strategy a little bit. But let's just get a little taste of your music first, and then we can weigh in. So I'll start with you, Harry. So here's So here it's about 2 minutes. I'll just play it top to bottom, and then we'll talk about it. You warned me that was a loop. You've shared this with me. I realized.
I shared on your Discord.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say I heard this before. I had forgotten that I had. Marty, initial impressions, and then I have some thoughts as well.
Whatever I just heard was absolutely not what I was imagining you guys were listening to. So that's really fun.
That's its own interesting. Like I once saw it wasn't really an installation piece, but it was kind of like an art gallery hosting a video exhibition where they had mounted cameras on top of TVs, and it was just footage of people's reactions while playing video games. And,
fun.
And it was interesting because you could turn the sound of the game on or off, where, you know, like you'd see their face and they'd be focusing really hard, and then you'd see them smile, and then you listen to it and you just hear these blood curdling screams, and you just realize like the weird apathy on their face as you hear that. There's just total mayhem and carnage. Was very funny, and slightly disturbing, but. Marty, you have your initial thoughts while it's fresh?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's super well produced. It's very nicely produced. It's well recorded. The mix was nice. It's a very specific purpose-built piece, in my opinion. It's got a very this needs to be for some sort of scene in a market, or it's got an ethnic, it's sort of got this sort of Greek Spanish feel to it. So I want to see it in some sort of party situation, a Mardi Gras or street carnival, or so I mean it has this very specific use for it, right? Like,
in other words, it's non-generic. Like it wouldn't fit any old place. In other words,
right. It's not going to fit any old place. But I'm going to ask you some questions about it in a minute. But like the thing that stuck out to me was, it's a fun feel piece, right? That has this sort of ethnic undertone. But I don't walk away with anything. The hook itself for this piece is just the feel. Right. It's a sort of the feel is the hook. There's not a melodic hook or progression hook that I will remember, because it for the most part, it just feels like it's an alternating 2-chord kind of piece that's got some sort of dance feel to it. So I didn't get these are not criticisms. I'm just sort of identifying what I would use it for. Is it feels like it would be useful as an accompaniment to something else, like voices, people talking, stuff could be happening over that, or it's maybe a montage of some street scene with party going. That's the way it struck me. And I appreciated this sort of color, the color changes and the tempo differences that happen. But I would say it doesn't stand out to me as like, oh, this is, unless all your stuff sounds like this, then I would not be able to. I would categorize you as like, oh, you're the guy that does that. But it doesn't. Other than the production, which is nice, I wouldn't know what sort of thematic or unique thing that I would get from you as a composer. So that would be what I would be looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So my question is like, why did you what did you write that for? What was your purpose?
Okay, so this is actually I saw an invitation, a call, I guess, for composers from Tommy Tallarico, and they wanted some people to recreate some old themes from some old video games that I think that there will be in the new game engine that he's been making.
Oh, sure.
The Intellivision.
Yeah, the Intellivision.
The Amico.
Yeah. So, first of all, it's interesting. A lot of things that you pointed out, I would like to dive into those, but we'll see how it goes. So, what thematic material exists in this piece, which is like minimal, is the 10 or 15 seconds that the original SNAFU game had. So this is mostly an attempt to keep that to, I think it's actually only 2 chords, like you said, and that those few seconds to be repeated. And yeah, I guess I didn't really. What was the other part of the question?
Well, I just was wondering, like, that actually explains a lot. Like, if you were, so I didn't realize the name SNAFU was referring to. Is it an old, like, 8-bit game? Like, I mean, what was the?
Yeah,
I don't know the game. Sorry.
It was the one with the snake eating. I don't even know how to describe it, but
It's essentially the Tommy put out a call for people to kind of recreate the theme to this game that was being essentially remade or remastered. Is probably fair for the new Amico.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is basically you trying to make a lot out of a little. In other words, Harry.
Yeah,
like,
mostly.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting piece of context that you were springing from existing material. I think that's important to bear in mind.
Yeah. So, if I knew what the original piece is, I might go, "Wow, that was really you really jazzed it up and made it much more fun than the original." Or I would say, "Gee, you missed that one hooky thing that was in the original piece that I wish you would emphasize more." But because I don't know the piece, I'm only judging it based on a standalone thing. So
I can springboard from that. I think I heartily agree. I think the mix is quite excellent, especially with the way you describe your career and feeling like, okay, I really want to kind of get off the ground, and you really make it seem like you are at the starting gate, as it were, and so your mix chops are quite beyond that of most people at that like at my point when I would have said the same of my career. My mixing and production chops were 1/100th of what you have done, so I think that's an enormous asset, and it's not just the fact that of balancing. I'm assuming that's you playing all the various sort of ukulele sounding things and
balalaika or whatever.
Yeah, it's just one. It really sounds like a nice variety of color.
I did sort of dubbed it a couple of times and slightly changed the EQ and stuff like that, but it's just one ukulele that
Oh, it's all uke. Okay.
It sounds more diverse than that. But the way you blend it with the sampled stuff is very effective, because that
gestural stuff is fun.
It works great. I fully agree, though, that the whole piece to me feels like an intro, and I keep waiting for, all right, now we've laid the table, and here's the thing, whatever it is, a theme, and a proclamation. There was an old Saturday Night Live bit a long time ago with this frustrated guy who, were on their weekend news update thing, where this guy comes on and he says, he's holding a newspaper and he says, "Can you believe this? It's like well, let me take it from the beginning. Well, actually, to tell you the truth, to be honest," and it's like, and he just keeps going and you never stop. Yeah, he never gets anywhere, and it's one of those amazing things, because no matter how long he goes, you're just sure finally he's gonna say something, and it's one of those rare, truly brilliant SNL bits, so. Not to sound overly critical, but that is kind of how this piece makes me feel, where it's like, and it's like, so
I know what you
so
mean.
this is where we have to separate what you did it for from its viability as a demo piece to represent you because I've written a lot of cues for projects where they're not interesting if you're just listening to them cold, but in game and in context, hopefully they do their job just fine. So that's
and actually that's most of what Austin's written. So
what, boring, uninteresting. Yeah, well, probably true.
I kid.
No, actually, you say that. I but you're probably right, because I often say that I don't think I'm a good composer, but I'm really good at preventing people from hearing the mountains of garbage that I write.
Well, I used to talk about, especially when Mike and I were doing like film scores and stuff. It's like we always knew that there was always going to be the opening, the ending, maybe a really important bit, at some other point, and then junk in the middle. It's like you just had to do junk in the middle because it was never going to be worth. And if it was worth listening to on its own, it probably wasn't going to work in the context that it needed. So it's sort of like listening to the score to Law and Order. Like it's very minimal music, and the music that comes in is completely not worth listening to on its own. But it works. So you, as a composer, especially when you're not just trying to do standalone music, when you have an assignment, you are going to have to do a lot of that stuff that Austin talked about. But that's hard then to use those pieces as, hey, hire me, look at this cool, unique stuff I can do. Because essentially everybody should be able to do this is not that I'm calling what you did junk in the middle, because it's really well produced. But you have to be able to do that. That's a given. So we're assuming you can do that, especially if we hear something that's got a strong theme, its own character that's worth listening to, and is well produced. Then I'm just assuming that I can say to you like, oh yeah, and now I need some more stuff, and it's got to be more ambient or more color and not thematic as much.
But even then, that's where the brilliance of like, it's very clear that this is a little bit of a tip of the hat to John Powell, and the
more than a little, probably.
What he does so exceptionally, which I think Jerry Goldsmith really kind of perfected, was rather than relying on big, long, lyrical John Williams-y melodies for everything, he'll have like 4-note little riff that always finds its way in there, and it always keeps your bearing on what's kind of on where I am, and it's something that's really striking, but it can do a kind of drive-by really briefly.
That's true. I add one other influence that probably I have when it comes to these things, and I just realized that this is why probably I like this thing on John Powell that you described. I used to play the electric guitar, as I said, and there was a point where I was actually playing some speed power fantasy metal. And a lot of those bands did do exactly what you described, a short riff, then another one, then down the road they both intervene and, or that's not the word, but
kind of coalesce or mix together, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. That's probably something that.
Yeah, and I think it's worth a great little. I mean, think about even like what. Like the Rite of Spring or something. You only need a couple of notes, it can be so minimal, but damn effective.
Yeah, one thing I would say too is the difference between coming from a guitar background or coming from a solo instrumental background or piano. And pianists can fall into this trap too, but guitar people, I do sort of notice like chords come first. Like the chord, like you're playing chords in a feel and a tempo, and it's chords. And it's hard to understand, like counterpoint to me is like the most important thing. Like, and it's of course not the most important thing, but I think counterpoint is very important because melodies are what stick in people's heads. Feels can be fun and you can sort of recognize it, but little motivic elements and melodies, they don't have to be long. I think I've talked about this at other places, but Berlioz did the Idée Fixe, and he had a long, drawn-out melody for his first symphony. What's it called?
Symphony Fantastique.
Fantastique, yeah. And then he did it again in this other thing called Harold in Italy. And I think what he realized was that the Idée Fixe for Symphony Fantastique was just way too long and complex, because every time he used it, it's just like, well, that's it. You got to do the whole thing. And
exactly.
It didn't break up. But Harold in Italy was more motivic, which meant he had the ability to do lots of different versions of it with different feels and in different contexts. So yeah, I guess my main point is that keyboard players tend to go like, well, I got 10 fingers, so I need to do 10. I need to like smash my hand on the keyboard, and that's my chords, and they do a lot of stuff. And guitarists tend to go, well, I got the 6 strings or ukulele, whatever it is, and it's like a fun feel, but like at some point I need that motivic element that brings it together, or it defines what I want to hear. Again, it gives it its personality. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
because that actually will help define you to me, right? I'll understand the way you think and what you think is cool. When I get you working a little bit more on the micro details of motives and melodies, because otherwise I'll get lost in the gestures. So like, if you know what gestural music is, it's just the sweep, these are just gestures, right? And with samples now, we can have the most amazingly produced gestural thing. All the woodwinds running up an octave and all the strings doing a sweep and an orchestral hit. And we just do these as samples, and you put all those together, and then it's like, okay, now you just have a fun gestural piece. It's a lot of times it's like trailer music, right? It's just like, I walk away from a trailer and it's like, wow, it's all style, no substance, right? It's just sound and fury and gestures and booms and crashes. And I don't walk away with anything that sort of touches my soul.
Such a huge point. Yeah, this is one of those things that I harp on a lot, because you have to, the novelty of doing certain things is not as novel as we often think it is, Okay, I've got the big downbeat, and then here comes the giant epic choir, and you think, oh, I wrote a thing. And it's like, but I've heard that gesture 40 million times. It's not a thing yet until you do something with it. So yeah, I agree. I think this piece has the gesture of that kind of energy and fun. And this is where it may be exactly right for where you did it. And then the difference with then submitting it for demos and things like that is I would open the piece back up and say, okay, now that I don't have to worry about Tommy's thing anymore, what can I come up with a killer tune? There were a few places where it actually felt like, it almost feels like the melody stem is muted. You could literally just right over top what you've got, have, some killer tune going, or, you take some moment in it, you create a little gap, and you fill in with similar style accompaniment and give us that, that thing that we'll never be able to forget.
The missing theme, yeah.
And
by the way, I would say this is something that I'm hearing more and more and more and more all over the place, where essentially my critique is not the production, not the samples, not the mix, but it's just sort of like, it sounds like it's accompanying something. It sounds like an accompaniment, and some important part of a stem has been muted.
Yeah.
So it's so close. If you just like unmute that one stem, and I'll go, oh yeah, now it all has a unique feel to, or a unique statement. It's just something that I understand who you are better. So anyway, you're not alone in this.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I'm kind of wondering if I'm, because I do like, I try to write themes and have as much as possible, at least memorable melodies and such. But I'm not sure if I can do that. I guess effectively. I certainly didn't try for this one.
Sure. Well, like I said, I didn't feel like it was necessarily missing depending on what the context was meant to be. So I understand more what you were trying to do. And if I knew the original SNAFU thing, I might say, wow, that was just, you hit it. But just as a piece that would make me go, I understand, who you are as a composer. That's not the one.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
Okay.
In the interest of time, I'm gonna, Eric. I'd love to play something of yours, and then we can just spend the rest of the time after that talking, in a combination of it and some big picture stuff. Because I still want to circle back. Don't let me forget. I want to circle back to this notion of, the endless rejections.
Right.
Yeah. So two-part question for you, Eric.
Yeah.
I have two pieces here from you. So tell me which one. And also, with your blessing, they're both fairly long, and I would love to excerpt them if that's at all possible.
Yeah. So one of them is a musical theater song, which I thought would be kind of interesting just to play because it's like, I'm sure you guys hear game music all the time.
It's really based on whichever one you want.
Yeah, and that one is more of like it's not a finished demo. I'm still like working on it, so that's like in a feedback stage right now. So I'd say let's just go with that first one, and you can probably crop through. There's like an opening choral thing that you don't need to play that probably eats up a good 20 seconds or something. And I don't know, we can just play it as long as you feel comfortable with it. We don't need to listen to the whole thing.
All right, so this is Happy New Year.
Yeah. And it's me singing. It's supposed to be a girl, so don't worry about vocals.
All too familiar with as someone who's in the middle of a musical right now, I'm all too familiar with these demos that bear little reflection to their intended final. Just to help frame, though, you said this is an unproduced.
Correct.
How on the spectrum of like literally piano and vocals all the way through, rough mock-up, what are we gonna get here?
It is orchestrated, but it's all MIDI, so nothing is really like recorded except for like a guitar.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting to finalize some things. It's a rough demo. I'll put it.
Got it. Yeah, well, yeah, but it's a lot better than as rough as
it's not an iPhone sitting next to my piano.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of those. So, all right, I'll play this for a couple minutes, and this is a taste of something wildly different.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Face what went wrong last year. One last moment we can mend. One embrace, then let it disappear. One more drink with one more friend. But I get this sinking feeling that we've said these words too many times before. And I know that they're still next to you, but I can't shake it off or leave the past alone. crying, what is wrong with me? No more giving life and limb. But I get this sinking feeling that I've said these words too many times before. And I know that they're still next to me, but I can't shake it off or leave the past ignored. Sincere, and will they know I'd play a song they never hear? Well, I'd have sent them my regards if I'd not wasted so much time. One more round for Auld Lang Syne. And will they know I lost my patience to pretend? And will they know they'll never hear from me again? Well, I'd have sent them my regards if I'd not wasted so much time. One more round for Auld Lang Syne. Happy New Year. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear. For Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness and
massive change of pace.
Yeah, I was about to say it's quite a trip.
Yeah.
I go ahead.
I was going to ask you to just like, so this is a work in progress, but what's this? What's the is there an assignment here? Like what's this?
No, this is for a musical, so it's the opening number of a musical.
Is it a musical you're writing?
Yes.
Like, is there?
Yes.
There's a story behind it, and you said it was supposed to be in your head. It's a girl singer singing this thing.
That is correct. Yes.
So I transposed everything an octave higher in my head.
Yeah, it's it should sit relatively comfortable in like a female voice range.
Oh, yeah,
it's just a little low in mine because I was trying to.
No, it was funny when you said it was you being a girl singer. I was expecting, because I've done
me to sing up.
No.
Oh, okay.
I've done stuff where I use processes to actually make my voice sound like a woman.
I had a version of it with that, and that I think creepy. It got a little weird. Yeah. It's a problem. Yeah, so that's what I was expecting. So it's like, gotcha.
So by the way, you have a nice voice, so that was really nice. It did feel like I wouldn't mind in your voice. I would love to hear it up maybe a third, because some of the lower stuff you hit fine, but it wasn't quite as. It didn't feel like necessarily the right range for you. But so it's a musical. Go ahead, Austin. You had something you wanted to say.
Ironically, in a way, in an unexpected way, my comment was in a way actually kind of similar to what we were saying to Harry, where other than the very cool and kind of interesting reharm of Auld Lang Syne, which I quite like. I especially like that it kind of descends into hell the deeper you get into the actual quote. When that comes in, you know how in very generic and arguably cliche musical theater terms, they rock back and forth in the classic verse chorus way, where there's a certain chattery quality to the verse, and then there's like, okay, bring it home with the chorus. And the high mark of the Alan Menkins of the world have set a kind of stratospherically high bar for how that can be. And I get the impression that the Auld Lang Syne is sort of operating as the chorus in that using that framework as our reference, that's the closest thing we have to that, because I did find myself feeling that similar, like, okay, we're teeing up for something, hit me. And when you hit me with the Auld Lang Syne bit, I mean, I sort of saw it coming, and obviously I get contextually, like, the song is literally invoking that. The lyrics are invoking that. The song is called Happy New Year. It serves a bigger function. I'm imagining it's a story that, you know, takes place at New Year's or something like that. Like, there's a lot there that makes it all make sense. Yet I still find myself kind of...
It took me totally by surprise, even though I had written down the song is called Happy New Year. Like, I wasn't expecting Auld Lang Syne. So that part worked for me. I didn't see it coming, and that was fun. But I agree totally. I wrote down, like, okay, where's the chorus? And not because all songs have to follow a certain formula, but when you sort of hint that you're going to do a certain formula, it sort of needs to pay off that way, because I felt like Auld Lang Syne, it had the function of chorus, and then you went into the Will They Know, and that was the Will They Know, that was a little bit more of the hooky, but it was almost like a bridge, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, I actually,
like
in my head, I consider
chorus.
in my head I was considering that the chorus, but if that's not reading, then I need to change something. So
I would say that the Auld Lang Syne does read a little bit as a bridge, and that I want, maybe the chorus just isn't quite there yet.
I think the problem with this, what I wrote down is will they know the chorus? Because I wrote that down as a question. And the reason, and of course, trust me, you can, like he said, Alan Menken, you can play with these formulas 1,000 different ways and still be unique, right? I mean, it doesn't have to follow a certain pattern. But there's a reason why we need that sort of, oh yeah, this is the thing I need to walk away with. And it could be something as simple as just changing the underlying feeling a little bit, expanding the would they know section. Maybe it changes keys there, or it repeats a different way. Something about it, for me, I wanted it to, like, if this is meant to be the chorus, then I want it to stand out. It felt a little bit too much like the verses, I guess is what I'm saying. And I might have to listen to it again to identify why I think that.
I think part of why you feel that way, because I felt the same, was that even though I know your accompaniment is, you know, mock-up, you know, not finished, it is a little samey throughout, you know, this kind of very figurated piano, is felt relentless. In my memory, I heard that, and then these incursions of violin and what I'm assuming is cello, and things, and you had a very kind of high percussion thing. It was a little like you know those boxes that you sit on, the cajon. It kind of
it is a cajon, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it sounded like that, and a little of that kind of stuff tends to go a long way. Like, save it for those moments. And you know, another classic trick is the sort of half time of your percussive subdivision when you hit that chorus. So if you know da ga da da ga da ga da ga da da ga da ga dum bum ba da beat or whatever, just to, you don't have to change tempo without the perception of it feeling like it's changing tempo.
Right.
You know, and that's in the arrangement. And I know to have, you know, a grain of salt with the nature of the arrangement in there. But I think that it's working against the, like, in other words, your chorus might have landed without changing one note of what you've got there.
Might have changed the underlie. Yeah,
exactly. If it felt like, okay, we're committing to something that, you know, if you listen again, I'll just bring up Alan Menken again because he's been in my head a lot lately. You know, one of the things that's very common if you listen to, like, you know, you go to Aladdin, A Whole New World, right? A thing that's common in those is they'll start with, you know, little keyboard or harp or something in the and the orchestra doesn't really come in proper until that first chorus. You know, they're very often holding back on the ingredients pretty dramatically. This is, I'm sure, stuff that you already know, but I it's just some food for thought on ways to make the the landing really stick, especially knowing that this is the opening of a show. It's got that burden of, okay,
Right.
if I let's presume this is a staged theatrical piece. I've just sat down in my chair. In the first 5 minutes, you are affirming that this was a good decision to commit the next 3 hours or whatever of my time.
Exactly.
It's got a lot to like. I remember when West Side Story was there was a touring production of it that came through the Pantages, and to sit down in that chair and just have that and it's like, okay, I'm ready, I'm here. It's just instantly you're there, you're ready for it. It's obviously it's sort of impossibly high bar to
Right.
to fit and but there's always a way. There's always something interesting. One of my favorite examples of this that's along the same wavelength, although very different, is Cliff Idleman in his early 20s being hired to score Star Trek VI, where here you have the precedent at that point was, Star Trek 1 and then subsequently 5, scored by Jerry Goldsmith with one of the most famous themes, the like massive anthemic, very memorable. And so then James Horner comes along for Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock, where it's like, okay, I'll do my version of that, What is it? Like that big same thing, like, okay, Horner takes a swing, manages to knock it out of the park too. So Cliff Idleman comes along and says, I don't think I'm going to compete with that. So instead, low strings and basses. Low cello and bass. Just real pianissimo over the opening time. Unbelievably effective. And it's like, and I know I'm kind of using this by way of analogy, but the idea that, there are a lot of musicals that come out and they knock it out of the park so hard that you think, unless I can literally do that, should find another way. And it's worth thinking about. Again, I don't know anything about where your show goes from here. Obviously, we're operating in a kind of a vacuum, but anything that can kind of wildly to sort of subvert the expectation is often appreciated.
Yeah, and I want to say one other thing, and this goes back all the way to my youth of first listening to music in any way, shape, or form. I'm always drawn to the music first. And then I'm like, were there lyrics in there? Like, I mean, that's just a problem for me. Like, I just
You're not alone in that.
Right.
As I get older, I start realizing, oh yeah, those Creedence Clearwater songs had great lyrics, and I never even listened to the lyrics of these Beatles songs. Like, I mean, I listen to them now because I like understand.
The hilarious thing is when you go back and you realize these lyrics are incredibly shallow.
Right.
Well, no,
Filler lyrics.
I this is an aside, sorry, but I used to love one of the bands I loved was America, and I swear some of those lyrics are the stupidest lyrics I've ever heard. I've been to the desert on a horse with no name. In the desert, the first part of the journey, there were plants and rocks and things. There were things and other things. I mean, it's just like, I don't know even what he's talking about. It's horrible, but I liked the song because of the music. So I liked what your song was doing. It gave me this sort of like, okay, this is going to be, and this is not to minimize anything, but I wrote down Disney because it had that Disney feel to it, especially thinking of a girl singing this. But I still don't know, other than will they know? That's the only lyric that stuck with me, which is good, because if that's the chorus, I think you can make more out of that. So I know what I'm supposed to take away. But I just wasn't paying attention to the lyrics.
Right.
Now I want to get into a production thing, and I know it's work in progress, but one thing I would say is you're working in a world where MIDI is very, very advanced, and whatever DAW you're working in and whatever samples you have, you got to spend the time to make your MIDI stuff sound as good as you can. You don't have to kill yourself on it. But Austin said a word, relentless, which it wasn't just the sort of accompaniment rhythm that was sort of relentless. I felt like every sample I heard was at 10 and the velocity was at 100. It just felt very like, wow, everything is, I didn't feel any nuance in the cello. And like, it's not like you're going to be able to take cello samples and make them sound exactly like a real cello
Right.
player, but you can come closer. And I need to hear more nuance in velocity, volume, throughout. I just like, this is like, okay, now you've got the notes in, but it had a relentless feel to it. Like it was, the piano felt like all my inner notes were as loud as my outer notes. Like it didn't feel played, it felt programmed. I hate to say that. It just, and not that you didn't play it, maybe you
Right.
did play it exactly that way, but I felt like the touch sensitivity on the piano it just was too relentless
Like
sounding.
machine gun, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how you feel about working, going back in and really trying to craft nuance in the performances of each line, but it feels needed to me, even at a demo stage.
Right.
I also, for what it's worth, at a demo stage, I often will just blatantly cheat and use ensemble string samples, knowing that if it's going to be played live by one violin, it will sound nice with one violin, but the mock-up one violin is almost always a disaster. And so even if I've
been battling that one for a while. I'm like, oh, this is.
Solo samples are, especially in strings, really, really hard to. So hard to make solo samples come through. The chorusing in group samples is always just a little bit better, and somehow I just feel like I need more touch sensitivity so that if you're playing a line, I just need to hear that, like, as you go up, and it starts to get louder, more intense, and then you do something else, it gets a little softer, and there's some, you look at an individual held note and you make sure it fades out at the end, it has a little. I just need more shape in all of the performance.
Right.
And the nice thing is I know you have it because you're a singer. So it's like you almost need to like say to yourself with each line that you're putting in, how would I sing this line, and do the dynamics based on how you would sing it. And I'm assuming was that you multing your voice for the chorus in Old Lang Syne?
Yeah, it was a chorus of me.
That is great. Are you kidding? I do a chorus of me all the time. Sometimes just out of desperation, but like, yeah,
Right.
you got to be able to do that. And you did a nice job. That was nice. The most human element in this production, of course, was your voice and then the chorus. The production of the instruments felt mechanical, too mechanical. I'm being harsh. Forgive me.
Right. No, I understand. There was absolutely zero automation in this whole thing. So that is.
Was it?
I understand.
I mean, you got to make sure that whatever your DAW is able to really read, and you want samples that are good with, at least velocity sensitive stuff, if not breath control, aftertouch,
Expression stuff, yeah.
Yeah, expression stuff. So sometimes it's if you can capture 90% of it in your performance, then you can go back in and doctor it up a little bit with editing.
Right.
Austin, anything?
Yeah, I was going to ask, because it almost reads a little bit as though it were like a Sibelius playback thrown into, I think to Marty's point, because that's often how you end up with those,
Right.
kind of very static, because the Sibelius or finale will just pump out, everything at a velocity, like you said, of 100. And you can see that it's not because I don't think a human being could do that, even if with a gun to their head could perform something that sort of statically.
Right. No, this isn't logic. It's just part of the reason why I just didn't do any automation was, you have 20 something songs in a show and you're just trying to get them out on demos to show to people. So, but like I said, it's not the end product of that demo.
No,
it's
but
very much like development.
But that I think puts Marty's point in kind of even potentially greater focus, because if you're
You want to put your
it,
best foot forward.
exactly, if you're showing it to somebody hoping that they go, holy crap, where can I give money to finance this?
Right.
Give them every reason to think it's, it's brilliant, We live in that world. That's just the nature of the competitive nature of it has made it where great sounding demos and mock-ups and you know are just, they're no longer a competitive edge. They're a bare minimum.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I would just make sure that in Logic, especially, I mean, you should be able to do this. That, like, you know, your keyboard is touch sensitive, and
Yep.
and Logic is reading velocities, and you know, if you got something that can control volume with a mod wheel or whatever, you're just doing that on the input stage. So it's not something you have to come back in and do after you input the notes. You want to be able to perform those notes as you know, a single solo cello line, let's say, that you're doing something with the mod wheel, right? Or it's reading your velocity, and the samples you have are not just playing back, you know, like square
Right.
chunks.
Yeah.
Anyway, it could be the samples, it could be the performance, but you don't want to just get it inputted and now it sounds a little too machine-like, and now you have to go in and do a lot of extra work. You want to try to get it on the input as much as possible.
But nice work, both of you, and always my appreciation for those willing to submit their work to feedback. It's never a easy thing or necessarily a pleasant experience. So I
Oh, by the way, I just want to reiterate, the reharmonizing of Auld Lang Syne was very tasty, and I love the sort of the dark side that it goes to towards the end of that chorus.
Cool.
It's very nice, and I was hoping you would do it twice, and you did, so I was happy.
Give the people what they want, you know?
So just to round this out, I just wanted to comment briefly, and Marty, I'd love your take on this, especially as someone who, you know, has experience in a hiring position, you know, like as someone who was, you know, in the audio director position is a very different, because you've probably gotten 5 million composer reels over the years from people looking for work, and will have far more informed opinions than I have. But I'll just lead off by saying that they're, on the one hand, blasting things to everyone on the planet to get as many, knowing you're going to get probably 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100 will be no's. It's really good to develop a thick skin to that. That said, you know, meaningful relationships that you spend a lot of time, there's an opportunity cost. Everything has opportunity cost, right? It's just a fact of life that choosing X means you can't do Y in many cases. So the time spent blasting things to the world, and the thing that you said that particularly kind of made me perk up was when you made a comment like, it doesn't even matter if it's your best work. Because I thought, why not? I wouldn't dream of wanting to send something out to the world. Like, the goal is not to get more no's. Maybe at first just to get used to that sensation, but quickly graduate past that stage and focus on, okay, you know, rather than, you know, like I reached out to this game company and I sent them my reel. They said, we're not looking for anybody, but, you know, see what you can find out about the person who responded to your email, and just try to get to know them as a human being and say, look, all good. But I just, you know, you mind if we have a coffee on Zoom? I'd love to just ask you some questions. And then, like, say you get along great, you know, it's like, oh, well, this was awesome. We should do this again sometime. 6 months later, shoot them a line. Hey, you up for another coffee or whatever? And because these investments, and this is all predicated on the idea that you actually are enjoying this person and they are enjoying you. And it's not networking. It's just literally, I've made a friend. And that time, I think, is worth 10 times what the throwing over the fence endlessly will yield. Now, in an ideal world, find a way to do both, because sometimes you do randomly strike oil by just throwing something out and getting back a yes. It absolutely can happen. But in my experience, I've just basically never gotten work that way. I've always gotten work from getting to know folks, and then I have friends, and some subset of my friends ends up yielding a work opportunity, and it's a bonus because I'm friends with them first. They don't have to. I will care about them. I will, send them a housewarming gift. I will ask them about how their kid's doing, et cetera, irrespective of if they can get me a job, because they're an actual friend. And so I do think that the implication of this is it's not a short-term strategy. You have to be willing to accept the fact that sometimes it's 20 years of planting seeds before something appears. And I get that that opens up all other questions of how the fuck am I going to pay the bills in the meantime and stuff. But I just wanted to put that out there, that no's for their own sake and cold calling for its own sake can be very valuable, if only to inoculate you from the pain of rejection, or at least make it easier. But at some point, it's like you're working harder, not smarter, in my estimation. Marty, tear that apart.
So I'm not taking any of this apart, actually. That's you and I had a conversation. Actually, our first in-depth conversation ever was a year ago, which I really enjoyed, and people who want to look for it can see it online. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I really have taken away from that conversation, and have now decided that I invented it, was when you said, we were talking about this very thing, and you said, if what's the worst thing that can happen if you make a friend? Well, you don't get the job, but you have a friend.
Yeah.
And
yeah. How horrible.
I love that. It's like that. Yeah. It's a great thing, because relationships, every the business that I've been in has been based on relationships. And if you have some sort of relationship with another person, it might turn into something where you can put food on the table. But if it doesn't, in the short term, at least you have a relationship, at least you have a friend, and there's always a possibility out there. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. As audio director, in all my years as audio director, I have never, ever hired anybody ever based on cold demos. It just doesn't happen. Now, 90% of the time, I don't actually even listen to them, which is a horrible thing to admit. It just has to do with if you're getting demos that are coming in and CDs or whatever, and they're stacking up, or you get a website that asks you to listen to something. I'll listen to something if for some reason I've met this person at GDC and we had coffee and they were sort of interesting to talk to, and then they said, hey, here's my YouTube page, or here's my SoundCloud or whatever, and I'm like, all right, maybe I'll listen to it. So I don't mean to be discouraging there, but I think Austin's right in terms of where do you spend your time trying to get your foot in the door. And I would say you both have talked about game jams, or you're in the theater and you're meeting directors, and those relationships are going to be way more fruitful than any sort of cold demo. And in this era of Zoom and Twitch and Discord and everything else, maybe some of that has to come in. I don't know exactly how that is. You join somebody's Discord channel and you jump into a conversation room, and but obviously as musicians and composers, we want to meet creatives in other fields. We want to meet the writers, we want to meet the game designers, we want to meet artists, we want to have friends with that. So even if you're friends with some cool concept artist and you're like, wow, I love that picture you made, it inspired me to do this little piece, and you send it to the concept artist and you have a relationship with that person. Now, they might not be able to hire you, but maybe they get a gig and they go, hey, there was this guy who did this cool thing one time. We should talk to him now that our project's gotten to the stage where we need to find a musician or a composer. So I'm just re-emphasizing just about everything that Austin said. I think figure out where to spend your time. Now, doing demos, workshopping your own stuff is really, really good to do. But trying to figure out how to broadcast that to a zillion people is most likely a waste of time. The next step should be, I need to figure out where to find people where I can have a relationship, let them know what I do, and then show them what sort of stuff I do. The relationship has to come first. I say that even though in my very, very early career, although actually this is not really true. I had relationships first, got a few gigs, then I was able to say, hey, we've done some work. You should listen to this, you people that I don't know.
That distinction's really important, obviously.
The relationship always comes first, I think.
Yeah, exactly. When one's work precedes you even a little, this calculation can change slightly. But until that point, relationships are basically the far better investment of time. I think it's actually, I'm glad that you made this shameful admission of not even listening to most of these demos, because I think that's a cold hard truth that a lot of people live in denial of. They think, oh, I sent my demo off to this person, they're going to listen to it, the clouds are going to part, they're going to tell me I'm a genius, and they don't realize that the thing is sitting in the spam folder the whole time and never even got opened, you know? And it's like, but in the meantime, if we had a chance to, meet, and the nice thing is that, before there was always resistance to purely online relationships, as it were, because it was there's a primacy to, show up to GDC, show up to DICE, show up to Game Sound Con, blah, blah, blah. But that's just a fundamental, like, you definitely take a lot of people, like Harry lives in Greece, that's not a small endeavor to come over for GDC, for example. There's people all over the world for whom it's a huge inconvenience at best, if not outright impossible or cost prohibitive. And the nice thing is that COVID has made everybody, big budget, small budget, etc., have to communicate this way and get kind of used to it. So, I've had a load of like, hey, you want to grab a coffee on Friday? Which means you in New York and me in LA or whatever are going to have a coffee. Like, I will make a coffee, and it's essentially as if we were hanging out, but we're just doing it on Zoom because we want to hang, and this is what we've got to work with. And people are getting used to that. So you can actually forge those relationships as if GDC had happened, because that's the only thing that gives you a shot at being listened to.
That's true.
And that's true. I mean, that's true. I'm in the same boat as that, like I could, even though I've got, a few things that I can lay claim to in my career, if I send something over like if there's some audio director at, Activision that I've never worked with before, my odds are only fractionally better than you if I send something in cold. I mean, it really is all in the relationship if I already know somebody, because other than that, unless you're just Hans Zimmer or somebody that they just suddenly would be like, wait, he wants to work with me, and they have like this instant hard on for him. 99% of composers are just not in that boat, and even no matter how supposedly accomplished you are, the relationship will always matter more. Anyway, I wanted to harp on that a little bit. Is there any other questions from either of you? I'm trying to, Marty, I don't want to abuse your generous time here. So, I'd love to wrap this up, but I want to make sure I'm not leaving any unanswered things on the floor here. And if you have a heart out, by the way, Marty, feel free to bail. You've already gone more than I expected.
No, this is great. This is fine. I mean,
well, much appreciated.
Edit this in some way, but maybe not. You tend not to edit anything, but that's okay.
A bit of an open book here. So Harry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that probably Eric should ask something first. I mean, because I could go on and on about all these things that you guys said, and I know that ideally I would need like 10 of these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, given our time, I think.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's nice to hear from people that. I mean, I've played both of your, games. Like I've heard your work in games before, so it's nice to just chat with the two of you. It's really cool. But yeah, I think even in my limited work that I've done, I've found that relationships, everything I've done has come from people I know, and I just assumed it's going to continue that way. So,
It will.
like, I'm glad it's not. I think for a while, I felt a little doom and gloom about like achieving a musical career, but lately I've just become more comfortable with doing what I'm doing no matter what. So I'm glad that that seems to be the case with everyone. So
Well, and I think Marty has, if I may speak as if you're not here, you have one of the most wonderful case studies of the way careers can go all different directions, and you can lay out a plan. You know, there's an old Yiddish proverb of "Man plans, God laughs." And I love that. For a guy that had enormous amounts of early career work in advertising, complete and total reinvention in the world of video games, and then that took a left turn, and now it's a reinvention yet again in video games, including running your own studio and or co-running, as the case may be, however you would describe it. And to me, it's like, in a way, the thing that all successful people have in common is just one simple fact: is that they didn't quit at some point, right? Other than that, the differences are going to be person by person. And so just having the kind of fortitude to say, all right, well, I don't love this as much as I used to, or this just exploded, or that company went under, or what. Like, everybody faces something, at some point, sometimes huge, sometimes it's like I was in a car accident and I'm blind now, or so. Like, life can throw all manner of crazy shit at you. And, for some it's too much, and for others it's just, okay, well, adapt.
Yeah, that perseverance and, getting up every morning and finding that you're still breathing is really important. So, we're musicians, we're composers, like, no one can take that away. The idea that you can actually make a living, buy a house, raise a family, and that's your job, is to be a composer, that is really rare. It just is. It not only is it competitive, it's just hard to do that. And so I think there's luck involved. There's right place, right time. I think that, how much talent is involved, that varies, right? So talent alone is not going to do it for you. So I always tell especially young composers, I'm like, learn a trade. Like, just figure out something else you can do to put food on the table. And it might even be like, well, yeah, I'm going to teach piano. Like, I think that's a trade. It might not be your number one goal, but always keep looking for those opportunities. And they're almost always relationship opportunities. Just if you're going to spend time working on something, look for the opportunity, whether it's an artist friend, a writer friend, or a convention, or whatever it might be. Maybe it's a Discord channel now. Just keep trying to find those places where you might get an opportunity to get a relationship where you can do the thing you really want to do, which is, write and produce music for something. And then the hard part, and I think is always hard at least it's been hard for me, is if I don't have a gig, it's hard for me to keep my hand in writing and producing. Like, I'm just lazy, right? I just need to have, somebody needs to be, it's not somebody paying me, but I need an assignment. It really helps me to
you need to be accountable to somebody for something.
Yeah. But if you can't find something that you're accountable to, see if you can have the discipline to get up and just spend some time in the studio and make something. That's really, really hard for me. If I don't have an assignment, it's hard for me. If I don't have an assignment, I'm like, woohoo, I'm taking a break. But I've been lucky, right? I've been lucky from way, way back. I've had a gazillion assignments throughout my life, and I've been able to make a nice living at it. So, but like Austin and I talked about a year ago, like, our paths are like hugely different. we have very similar heroes. We think similar ways, but we know what it's like to have a dry spell where the phone is not ringing. In the old days, the phone used to ring. No one's talking to you. There's no assignments coming up, and you're like, "Wow, did I make the wrong decision? I should have stayed. I should have kept painting houses because that's what I used to do. Because at least I was, had a steady job, put food on the table. But you're a musician. You're both musicians, and it's sort of a blessing and a curse. Like you're not going to be happy being an accountant or doing something else, and so that your only choice really is to persevere and keep working at it and finding more opportunities, and then at some point you look back and say, wow, this is a cool route that I took, and it's going to be a unique path. Not pathless, a path.
It's true.
Although I don't know, the path is the mark of the self-appointed messianic figure who wants to wreak havoc on us all. So
Maybe
So
I
that's
just
me.
yeah. Oh, okay, there we go.
Marty the God Slayer.
Well, actually, there was another quote that I saw in the last year, and I'm going to screw this quote up, but it has something to do with, you look back and you see, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw this up. Something about, how is it? It's very simple concept, but it's as you're climbing and struggling, you're in a fog, right? And you don't know what to do next. There's fog all around you. When you look back, you see the hill, you see the path, and you no longer see the fog. So it's always easier to look back and see how everything connects and how there turned out to be a path. But when you're in it, it's fog. You only see fog in front of you. And it's a simple concept, but as long as you know that, like, you're not going to, while you're doing it, you're not going to see the next step. But the struggle is what's important. So when you look back, you see the struggle, but you don't see the fog anymore. But remember, when you're doing it, there's still fog in front of you.
100%.
Somebody should look up that quote, and it's a beautiful quote. It's not anything what I just
Fog mountain quote.
struggle, fog, something.
Could I just say one thing, because I kind of feel that and it sort of ties with what you've been describing right now about the career and the struggle, and you mentioned also Discord and having to have an assignment to do something, because I'm just slightly worried that it came across as if I'm trying to collect the no's and the rejections.
No, I don't think I misinterpreted you, for the record. I was kind of caricaturing what you said to make a point, but so I think I got you clearly, but say what you're gonna say. I'm not trying to cut you off.
No. And I'm also curious because this was kind of something that I would like to ask you guys if we had the time. I had some notes here to sort of tell you. So this is my plan. What do you think? Is it complete crap or something? But the reason I'm trying to do this thing is, first of all, it's like having an assignment for me, since I don't have any other opportunities around here, at least for the time being. I thought, okay, I'll give my own assignment, and I'm just trying to find games. And when I say I send to everyone or every game dev or whatever, it's not really everyone. I'm trying to find things that I kind of have something for them that draw me in some way, with the hope that I will actually, at least get into that Discord server and start making these relationships. And I've actually had this happen twice so far, where I sent something out to some, and I'm not talking about audio directors and big names. I know I can't just jump straight there. So I'm just trying to find small projects, maybe even with no budget, if they seem like something that looks amazing to me or that I would love to do, and because I would love to build that connection. So yeah, I've joined servers where someone said, hey, that was a nice demo, we liked your music, but we don't need music, but we have our Discord server if you want to hang out. so that was kind of, I was wondering if that's a viable solution, or not a viable, but a decent tactic for now, especially because my initial plan before COVID was like to tour the Europe and maybe even go to the US and just meet people at conferences.
You can
and
do
stuff.
both.
You know, the Discord thing is not contingent on where you're, you know, if you got a laptop you can take with you on the road, do both, you know, come hang out.
But I'm just saying because of COVID now it's that the thing of
Oh, well, yeah, sure, that's certainly paused. I mean, you'd be surprised. You never know what will happen. I'm literally scoring a film right now that has the relationship origins are more than 10 years ago. I was in this mode, 15 years ago. I was in this mode, this cold calling mode. And back then, the Hollywood Reporter used to have these production trades, these production charts that would say, here's every movie that's in pre-production and every movie that's shooting. And here's the phone number for the production office. And you'd get some assistant who was like, oh, another composer, good God. But I would call, I kept a spreadsheet, and I made probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 calls over about a 10-month period. And I got exactly one job out of it. It's probably the worst thing I've ever scored. It was awful. But, you know, I was thrilled to get that job. But funny enough, one of the calls I made was this guy. At some point, I realized they weren't going to call me back. So I used to call and say, I work in post-production. I'd love to talk to you about your needs. And I would just skirt around what I actually do in order to get them on the phone. And one guy answers, and he's like, so what do you do? And he's like, we just are starting post now, and we haven't filled every role. And he was thinking maybe I'm calling on behalf of a post house that can hook him up with visual effects or sound design or something. I'm like, no, I'm a composer. And it's like, oh, right. So we start talking, and you know, hey, tell me about your movie. It was like a monster movie kind of thing, you know, like I don't even remember now, it was so long ago, but some kind of probably generic horror monster film. So we start talking about, you know, film scores that he likes. Turns out the guy's a big film score buff, and we're connecting and bonding about, oh, do you know Jerry Goldsmith scored a, you know, Warlock, and oh wow, I didn't know anybody else knew that score. La 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 la. You know, become a couple of nerds. We talk on the phone for like 2 hours, and really connect and become like buddies over the course of that phone call. So then at the end of 2 hours, it goes, look, I got to be honest with you. Last week, we hired a composer on this film, and I have no reason to not work with this guy. But you and I clearly get along great. So please stay in touch, because maybe, hopefully, there's some way we can work together again someday. And I was like, yeah, man, like, I don't even worry about that. I'm just glad we met, because like, how often do I meet a director that knows as much about film music as a composer does? I mean, this guy was such a nerd. We got along great. A month later, I get a call from a random director who goes, hey, a buddy of mine recommended you. I'm looking for a composer for my film. We just entered into post. So this guy had recommended me off of a phone call where he explicitly was like, I'm not going to hire you. And then a friend of his showed up needing a composer. And then the funny thing is that one of the lead actors, the lead actor of that film was this guy named Ross, who had gotten his break as one of the Band of Brothers actors. He was one of the, you know, paratrooper soldiers. And you know, he was a working actor, character actor, keeping real busy ever since doing that. And he was the lead of this. And they called me, and this movie was made for nothing, the lowest budget thing of all time. I mean, it's literally like a $40,000 feature film. And I did the score for nothing. And so we're finishing up, and they go, but it was great. It was this wonderful romantic comedy. So we're finishing up, and they go, we want to record a director's commentary track, you know, back, I don't know if they even still do those, because that was such a phenomenon of DVDs. So he said, we don't have anywhere to record, because we have no money. And I said, well, I got a mic. I can put the computer on the screen, and we can all huddle around them, or you and the producer and the actor can huddle around my mic, and I'll just hang out on the couch behind you. And so I got to meet this actor, this Band of Brothers guy. We became good friends, and he was like, you know, do you have any of your music and I could listen to? And I had a couple of CDs of soundtrack albums for other things that had come out. And so he puts them in his car, and then, you know, another month later goes by, he calls me, he goes, hey, I just gave your CDs to a couple friends of mine that are like fellow Band of Brothers actors that are now also producer writer types. And over the following like 5-year period, all those actors handed me around to various productions. And then now, funny enough, all those years later, that original guy, he's directing for the first time. I'm literally working on his film right now. That original actor of that little romantic comedy that I got through a cold call, technically, but not the guy that I cold called. So it's like, you have no idea what the outcome. In fact, funny thing is, I never met that guy from the phone call until the premiere of the movie that he connected me for. He showed up in solidarity to his friend for our like Newport Beach Film Festival premiere or whatever of that film. So it was like, and then the funny thing is, I basically never spoke to him again. Like, we just kind of went our different ways in life. And we're still friends on Facebook, I think, but I got some of the most meaningful friendships in my life out of that call, because it was just open-ended, and it did not bother me in the slightest that he did not have a job for me. So I just, when you say, oh, I end up in this Discord of these guys, even though they told me explicitly they're not looking for a composer, it's like, you never know where you'll be in 5 years from now. Someone you meet, some person shares, hey, check out this thing, and then you get to chatting, and then 5 years later they've started a game company or something. Who knows? It's just one of those little reminders of always stay open to possibilities, and just show up.
Yeah. But again, I think the most important thing in these situations is what you both said earlier, that I actually enjoy being in those servers and connecting with these people. Like, I will go to watch their streams on Twitch and just, talk about anything else, and I basically have forgotten that I wanted to write music.
Exactly. I think that's so important. Just be, it's a weird thing, because it's basically, I'm saying, just remember to be a normal human, like, where people like hang out with friends and act genuinely to each other, as opposed to this networking, scheming, strategist. So in any case, I'm going to call it there. Guys, stay in touch. Marty, thank you so much for your time, especially for the extra generosity.
Yeah, it's nice meeting you.
Yeah, it was good meeting, and say hi to everybody in Chicago. I bet you I know some of the actor friends so that's.
I'll go around and say hi to every single person for you, just to cover the bases. No, but really, thank the both of you. I know, like, stuff like this is really cool, just for, I don't know, people. I'm speaking on my behalf, but just like sort of lighting the fire under whatever. I don't know. It's really cool that you took the time in your days to do this. So.
Yeah, appreciate it.
More than what was originally scheduled, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, happy to be of help, and really appreciate your patience. I know that we all kind of put this on our calendar, so to speak, like literal years ago. So I appreciate all three of you. I will let you all go enjoy your sort of morning, afternoons. In our case, Harry, your evening. And
Wait, it's in Greece.
yeah, what time is it there for you right now? Your room is so well lit; it looks like broad daylight.
No,
It's gotta
that's
be like
just
11.
my lamp.
Yeah.
It's 9:50
9:50
All right.
at night. Okay.
p.m.
All right. So you
Go enjoy.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Thanks again, guys.
Okay. You too.
Thank you.
Have a good one. I'll hopefully talk to all you soon.